Welcome back everybody to Art Bros Talk, episode 4. Today we're going to be talking about not so much an issue, but a thing that I've been noticing, an over-reliance on 3D when people make webtoons.
And how to make your webtoons better.
Yes, and I want to start by saying that I have no issue with using 3D anything when you make your webtoon. I use 3D models on my webtoon too. It's completely fine. I've just been noticing that a lot of people are relying too much on the 3D model and skipping very important processes when it comes to sketching, and it's stopping them from getting better. So things like people will pick the 3D model of a pose and will just draw the clothes over and then the face, and that's it, which is not the point.
Yes, you're skipping the whole drawing process.
Yes, and usually the people that do this are at a level with their drawing where this is actually hurting them getting better. So instead of, understanding the 3D model, they are just tracing it, drawing over it. And why that is bad is because the more you understand the 3D model, the more you use the 3D model as an assist on your sketch, the less you need it.
Yes, because what we've seen is that there's people who will build almost all their frames, all their composition on models, and when there's a place where they didn't put it, suddenly the quality of the drawing goes way below, and that's because they are not actually drawing, they are tracing a lot.
Yeah.
So our advice and what we want to talk about is how to create better, let's say, habits.
Yes. So, an example, a telltale, is that how you say it? A telltale sign?
Maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Well, a clear sign to me that someone is using 3D models will sometimes be very rigid poses and floaty clothes. Like, people will need to understand
the movement that they are drawing in the clothes does not correspond the movement in the pose.
Yeah,
because they don't know how the pose got there. People
need to understand that a 3D model is very hard to pose realistically. It makes it, especially around the shoulders, you can really notice how the torso is just this block, and the shoulder seems to have two separate, like the shoulder seems to be too separate from the torso, and so people are, even if they stop using after a while the 3D model, they learn the anatomy of the 3D model and not of the person.
So they get confused by following stuff that's not completely correct.
Yeah.
How can they fix this?
So the person that I've seen explain it the best is Ethan Becker. He always talks about, he's an animator. I think I told you that he's a professional animator, and he tells people to trace, but he tells them how to trace. So what you're meant to do is to use trace to visually find the shapes of things. So when you grab a 3D model and you bend its arm and you're gonna trace it, you're not supposed to trace the outline of the arm. You're supposed to identify the sections of the arm. You're supposed to go, okay, so this is the bicep, this is you know, the underside of the arm, you know, here between the armpit and the elbow, and here's the forearm. People are not doing that. They're just tracing the outline of the entire thing when it really will help them in the long run to use the 3D model as it's effectively a silhouette. So you have to learn to find the shapes inside that silhouette.
Yeah, we've been talking about this before. Like, using tools to cut corners is great. It will save you time. It will make you more productive. But if you use those tools to hinder your process without even realizing, you can get stuck. Another example is, I see many people committed to painting and they are skipping all the steps to the painting. Like, the drawing can have issues, then the perspective, then the shadowing. So if you keep accumulating those issues, in the final product is gonna show up.
They're trying to learn too many things at once, so the errors of all of them outweigh, like, are just too present in the image. You can clearly see that the drawing needs a little bit of work, the composition needs a little bit of work, the color theory needs a little bit of work, the shading needs a little bit. So you end up with a
bunch of things to correct.
Yeah, you end up taking longer to learn everything because it's a lot harder to see your own mistakes
when they're all piled
up on top of each other.
So going back to the tracing and the assistance, really, it would be better if all of us don't skip some steps, like learning proper anatomy sketching. Like, and you don't even have to sketch a whole person. That can be a big problem. Just sketch a hand, sketch elbow to fingers, forearm, then start adding limbs, try different poses, and with time you're gonna see that you're gonna be better at dominating the perspective, the body, and then tracing can become a tool to speed up what you already know how to do. But if you rely too much on these tools, you're gonna get stuck.
The more you understand what you're drawing, the easier it is to build things onto it. That's what I was saying, that one of the clear signs that someone is tracing instead of sketching is when everything that is not included in the 3D model just doesn't fit right. Like, the clothes look flat, a necklace, instead of having, you know, the curves of it being on top of the chest just falls right down as if the chest wasn't there and it was just all flat, you know, things like that. And I understand that not everyone has the time, especially when you are already going full throttle on your webtoon and you're drawing non-stop every day. I understand that it's gonna be hard to find the time to get better at things, but you have to. If you don't strive to do better, then what's the point? You know, it's as an artist, you're supposed to evolve. You're supposed to get better. It's part of doing what you're doing.
And even as a hobbyist, we're taking aside the heavy artist part. Even as a hobbyist, if you try to take it like baby steps and don't get desperate because you're not making these big paintings. If you take baby steps, like, improvement piles up. Improvement does pile up. Let's go back to the 3D models. There's the 3D models in characters, in body, and there's the 3D models in background.
Yes.
What can you tell me about specific uses?
I will say that tracing, everyone's going to agree that tracing a 3D modeled background is not as bad as tracing a person.
That saves the most time.
Simply because it's the amount of time that you save is immense. And there are also drawbacks in that if you're tracing without building an understanding of the perspective of it, of the volume of things and such, that's when you end up with characters that, if you like map it out, seems like they're below the floor or
yeah,
above,
they don't match.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like they match the ambience they're in.
And also, when somebody tries to illustrate the shadows over a 3D model of a background,
Yeah,
there can be a little bit like it doesn't fit properly.
Yeah.
How could somebody improve their background work without tracing, or help the tracing look more natural
well,
in their drawing?
As someone who's trying to improve their backgrounds on the side, it's very difficult because especially buildings, especially urban settings, are very detailed, and they don't quite work as well if you don't add some of those details. Like there's the minimum detail required for it to look acceptable is much higher than if you're drawing a character. A character can be very simplistic and work, but a background needs a lot more work to be for you to be able to understand what it is and the scale of it and the size. And what I recommend is to look for, as with most other visual arts, you find some reference and you try to sketch it as quickly as possible, and you try to do as many angles and as many settings and as many different types of background. Just try to replicate them as sketchy and loosely and as quickly as possible, and you sort of start to pick up how the perspective of each one works, what you can get away with not including, what you have to include,
And classic art techniques also work, like for example to draw the point of view lines.
Yes. Defining your horizon line, defining your, don't know how to say it in English, but your more prominent
foreground, background.
No, you're more prominent, the lines that go off of the point. But yeah, that also thinking of your foreground, midground, and your background separately is also very important.
And if you think that all that we're talking about is too much information, remember, you can always take stuff out of what you're doing and keeping the least amount of parts to do those well, and then to add different stuff on top of it.
The way that I find helps me the most is to not look for photo reference, is to look for other people's drawings as reference. To look at other people's videos, like other people's videos of how they do it. That I feel like helps me a lot. Like when I want to know how to draw something, I look at the real thing much later. I look at drawings first. It's a lot easier to understand which lines you should be drawing where when you can see them, and you don't have to like figure them out. So just look at old drawings of cities, or look at other people's concept art for backgrounds or things like that. Just look at other people's work.
So let's recapitulate. Let's do a summary of your advice to our people. What would it be?
Take any chance you can to practice. Even if you're in the middle of work, try to take the chance, try to take the extra few minutes to turn at least some of it into an exercise for you to get better at. Don't rely too much on your shortcuts. They are meant to cut corners, not take you to the finish line. Take a good look at take a good look at your process. Like, just sit down and think about what you're doing and try to figure out which step of your process you can what step of your process would benefit the most of you taking some time to work on.
And I guess we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Alright, thank you all so much for hanging out, keeping us company and all that stuff. We really do appreciate it every single time. Like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, help us get to 500 subs, maybe. That'll be nice. And we'll catch up with you guys later.
See ya.
See ya.